From deep in the Burbank Media District, it's time for another edition of My Burbank Talks, presented by the staff of My Burbank. Now, let's see what's on today's agenda as we join our program.
Hello, Burbank. Craig Sherwood here with you once again, and a very interesting show in interesting times. I've got Eric Baumgartner with me today from the Burbank Fire Department, and let me give you a little background on Eric. Eric Baumgartner serves as the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Burbank Fire Department. He has responded to numerous state and national incidents of significance, including multiple governor-proclaimed emergencies and presidentially declared disasters across multiple states. Eric has been deployed by the California Office of Emergency Services on emergency management mutual aid requests to assist other agencies in their emergency operations centers in various roles, and is also deployed as part of an incident management team for field response. He serves or has served on numerous technical committees with the County of Los Angeles or the State of California, including the State EOC Credentialing Program Steering Committee and the State Standardized Emergency Management System Technical Committee. Eric has been a public safety professional for over 20 years, specializing in emergency management. Prior to his career with the City of Burbank, Eric served as the emergency coordinator with the County of Los Angeles and then with the City of Los Angeles. Eric has served as an expert witness for emergency planning for the United States District Court and has testified for the State Assembly as an emergency management subject matter expert. A lot of stuff going on. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Well, I think this is really interesting because of the times we're in right now. So let's start out. We heard your professional side. Let's hear a little about your professionals. I mean, your personal side, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I actually have ties to the community. So I was actually born here in the city of Burbank back when there was a Burbank Community Hospital, long time ago. Grew up in the area. I grew up in Glendale, and when my parents bought a house, we moved back to Burbank. I've been a longtime Burbank resident ever since then. When I moved out, I've stayed local to Burbank since then. So not only do I work in the city of Burbank and serve the community of Burbank, I have ties to the city with my friends and family being here. So I have skin in the game when it comes to what I do with the city.
Oh, fantastic. I think, I've seen every time something goes on that's big, there you are at city council meetings, briefing the council and the public, briefing the public because the council already knows in advance. I'm sure you send them updates immediately when things go on. But let's start off by asking what the emergency management coordinator does, and what does emergency management mean for the city of Burbank?
Yeah, that's a great thing. So emergency management is unique. Everybody always sees fire trucks going down the street, police cars going down the street, even water and power, public works, parks and recreation. Pretty much they know what these different agencies do day to day. Emergency management is more of a behind the scenes thing. In the city of Burbank, it resides within the fire department. With most cities here in Los Angeles County, if they've got an incorporated city with a fire department, the emergency management role lies within the fire department. Larger cities like the city of Los Angeles have a dedicated department just for emergency management. Emergency management really is the behind the scenes coordination for everything. We have 4 phases, technically 5, but I'll go into the 4 phases that we're responsible for. First thing that we do is we're responsible for mitigation, looking at different hazards that might impact our jurisdiction and how can we lessen the impacts of those hazards.
Prior to an incident, of course.
Yes, prior to an incident. So we know that, it's Southern California, we have earthquakes, wildfires, things like that. So we look at all of the possible hazards, and it's our job to look at how do we mitigate those effects to the city. After we look at what we can do to mitigate, well, we can't remove the threat altogether. So then we go into our preparedness phase where we prepare both the community as well as the city departments or the jurisdiction to respond to such an incident. So we want to make sure that we're doing both our internal preparedness, making sure our departments are well aware of what their roles and responsibilities are in emergency, as well as that external preparedness. So you'll see me out at different fire prevention things or disaster preparedness events where we're really trying to educate the public that they need to take some responsibility and be prepared, make a plan, have a kit. Next, we move into our response phase. So when the incident does happen, we go into that response mode. And while you see fire department responding to the fires, law responding to criminal events, emergency management is really the orchestrator behind everything. We're kind of like that orchestra conductor. I don't make the music and I don't play the instruments. My job is really to look at what would best sound right in this orchestra and what they should actually be playing in that tempo. So my job is really to coordinate our internal agencies, so our city agencies, as well as coordinating with neighboring cities and state and local officials and coordinate those things that we might need for mutual aid or things like that.
Right. So you're not at the scene saying, okay, engine 11, go over there and hit that exposure. You're big picture.
Correct.
And you're not at the scene directing personnel. You're looking at assessing the entire situation.
Correct. I might be at the scene, but my job is not to handle tactical response. My job is to be there as an advisor. So our incident commander, maybe from the fire department or whoever is leading this, they'll be responsible for all the tactical operations. If it's a wildland fire, they're responsible for it. I'm there really listening to what they're doing and trying to think ahead. If we're starting to do evacuations, it's my job to start thinking about shelter operations and making sure that we have a shelter and a place for people to go. It's my job when we have that wildfire to also start thinking about the future with recovery efforts. And depending on when we have it, like the Eaton fire is a great example, late in the year like this, where we're in winter and there's rain right around the corner, making sure that we're taking those efforts immediately to make sure that we're prepared for that next tragedy that we might have. So I'm looking at the strategic level stuff while the incident commander is looking at the tactical level stuff.
Okay. Wow. It's a lot of responsibility, actually. So in August of 1979, Burbank Fire Department, along with Glendale and Pasadena, formed Verdugo Fire Communications and merged the three cities together to dispatch. And by 2000, there were 6 more cities who joined. And now there are up to 14 agencies that Verdugo dispatches for. So I remember the old days of, we just had a single number on our engine and a single number on our, except for we had old engine 11A.
Yes.
But now Burbank can all have are the 10s, and Glendale's in the 20s, Pasadena in the 30s, and so on. Each city they have the first 2 numbers are their identifier or their first number, depending on how many numbers there are. Why is Verdugo, and not having it centrally located only, like it used to be, and our police still are, but why is Verdugo a good thing for Burbank?
Yeah, so a lot of people, as to your point, when they see our fire engines, they think we have way more fire stations than we actually have because of our numbering system. They might see engine 16 going down the street thinking we have 16 fire engines. But yes, Verdugo Fire Communications Center is our central point. It's got 14 agencies, 13 cities, and 1 joint powers authority being the airport. With that, the way we number our resources is, for example, Burbank, we're Battalion 1. So our battalion chief is called Battalion 1 on the radio. And then all of our apparatus or everything else is Engine 11, Engine 12, Engine 13. And you can think of that first digit as the battalion number. So Battalion 1, Engine 1 is Engine 11. We move over into Glendale, that's Battalion 2. That's why all their stuff starts with a 2 and so forth. It's a good thing because we actually run what we call an automatic aid system. So we kind of run like a borderless fire department. Even though we're each autonomous fire departments with our own administration, our own budget, and we are responsible to our city and our constituents, when it comes to response, to improve that response and make sure we have better response times and we can serve the public with specialized equipment that might not be available in each of the cities, we run a borderless fire system. So the closest appropriate apparatus may be what responds.
And let me get into that a little bit. So you're talking about an air utility, you're talking about a rescue cushion. Different cities have these things. So they would, and only like one city has it for all the cities, and they dispatch to any city that needs it.
Correct. So for us, we don't have our own full USAR component. We do have personnel who are trained in USAR, and we do have USAR tools and equipment on our ladder trucks. But to actually have a full USAR component, we either have City of Glendale responding into the City of Burbank or City of Pasadena responding in. They have full USAR components for the Verdugo system. As such, we provide a full complement for a hazardous materials response. So if something's going on in another city that needs a hazardous materials response, although they might have personnel that have gone through hazardous materials training, Our team is the one that would actually respond along with possibly Glendale's hazmat team. So we would respond on that hazmat capability. You had mentioned air, so we have air utility vehicles as well. If we have a large structure fire or something of a hazmat that requires us to change out air bottles frequently, each of our rigs carry spare air bottles. Our ladder trucks, our engine companies, ambulances, they can change out air bottles, but at some point we're going to need more than what we even carry on the rigs. So we do have air utility vehicles also spread out throughout the Verdugo system, and an air utility can be assigned as well to refill bottles on site. So it's, instead of each department having to invest the money into all this specialized equipment that may sit around and not be used all the time, the equipment is spread out through the different agencies, and when needed, it responds from that agency to a neighboring city. But it's not just our specialized equipment. You might be like on the border near Burbank and Glendale, and there might be a traffic collision, and you might actually see a Burbank fire engine and a Glendale ladder truck because they were the two closest appropriate apparatus to respond to that call. So it's not uncommon, even for non-big events where we need specialized equipment, for our units to cross borders just because they are the closest unit to that scene. For example, we're over here in District 12's area. For truck 12 to get all the way up on the hill for something is going to take a little bit longer than possibly something coming from Glendale if it happens to be over in 27's area. So we want to make sure that we can get the closest equipment there quickly. It's really for the benefit of the community.
Yeah, it basically streamlines everything, and response times go down for everything. So it makes it a good thing.
It's mutually beneficial to everybody.
Okay, let's expand it a little and now talk about Area C, which now, Verdugo, Burbank, of course, is part of. Area C is now a larger area. So talk about what they call Area C.
Yeah, so Area C is what we call a mutual aid area. Now, Area C is broken up slightly differently depending on the discipline. So we have 3 different Area Cs. We've got law enforcement mutual aid Area C, we've got disaster management Area C, and then we've got fire Area C. And the reason why the borders are slightly different, for example, emergency management Area C incorporates the city of San Fernando, as well as law enforcement mutual aid incorporates the city of San Fernando into it. But fire Area C does not, because the city of San Fernando contracts to LA City Fire Department. So there's slight differences in the borders, but Area C pretty much is, for the most part, Burbank to the far west, and then along the foothill communities going east along the 210 corridor. So within that, any one of those 3 disciplines that I just talked about, either emergency management, fire, or law, we have mutual aid plans already in place, or automatic aid in the case of Verdugo. The nice thing about Verdugo is Area C lines up with our Verdugo cities, so it makes it more of an automatic aid versus a mutual aid type situation where they're already being dispatched by one centralized dispatch entity.
Many times when there's a large brush fire somewhere in Santa Barbara, somewhere else, they always will contact Verdugo, and they want a task force. So I guess that would be an Area C task force. Is that correct? Is that how they term it, or
slightly?
And sometimes you have 2 and even 3, making up one engine out of each city that goes up for the situation, and a battalion chief.
So we have a robust mutual aid component within the state of California. So when things like that, a wildfire is a great example because those happen every year. When that out-of-county wildfire happens, that county will put in a request for resources. They may request any kind, any type, which when things are really going bad, it doesn't matter what kind of resource. And when I talk about kind of resource, we're talking fire engine, thing like that. And then type, we have different typings. So type 1, type 2, type 3, type fire engine, which is the different sizes of our fire engines. The ones that you typically see driving around the city of Burbank, that's a type 1 fire engine, or our heaviest or highest ability fire engine. So when they put that request in as any type, any kind, they're going to get whatever's the closest, and they're going to report directly there. But a lot of times, like what you're talking about, they'll put in a request for 2 strike teams or possibly a task force. And that request will go through that mutual aid process. It'll go to LA County Fire first. LA County Fire then looks at the availability within the region of Los Angeles County. And yes, we would send out a strike team. And for example, we might send out strike team 1201 Alpha, 1201 being our designation for a Verdugo strike team. So we have 1201, 1202, 1203. That Alpha at the end of it means it's a type 1 strike team. So type a 1201 Charlie would be a type 3 type strike team. Typically,
I'm learning things.
Typically, we only do alphas because that's predominantly what we have. So yes, you would see a strike team that's made up of multiple agencies. So that 1201 alpha basically ends up being a conglomerate of different fire resources from Area C or Verdugo. So you might see with 1201 alpha, for example, a Burbank battalion chief, 1 engine from Burbank, 2 engines from Glendale, and 2 engines from Pasadena, making up that strike team. It'll be 6 pieces of equipment altogether, 1 of them being a battalion chief, 5 being fire engines, and they will go out representing us as mutual aid to that jurisdiction.
And they can be gone sometimes for as long as, is there a maximum amount of time they're allowed to be gone? But I know sometimes they're gone for a week and 10, even 10 days.
So the general rule of thumb is about 14, usually is what they try to cut people off at as the maximum deployment, but that can always be extended based on the needs of the incident. So there are ways that those can be extended in an emergency. They could be gone for just a couple hours on something local where they're released as soon as there's no longer a threat to property and the locals will now continue the effort on their own. They might be there for a couple days, or it might be a large campaign fire where we're sending resources to Northern California and they are there for 2 or more weeks.
And it's the same crew also. It's not, you don't rotate it out every 2 days like you do in the regular department. It's that crew stays with that engine the entire time.
Correct. There are some examples of exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, yes. If we send a crew out for one of these strike team deployments, it will be the same crew. When we have seen some of these extensions on deployments, we have made arrangements when they've been out for several weeks that we will use our van and we will take personnel up the day before a shift change, and we'll swap the personnel out at that incident with their equipment and bring that other crew back to get some rest because they have been gone for several weeks. So there are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, yes, that crew will be with those engines the duration of the incident.
I want to touch on one point too. I hear a lot of complaints being in the media, and people want to complain about everything. Oh, firemen make so much money. Look how much they make on the state of California website. Look at how much money they make. Burbank does not pay for a task force when they're gone for 2 weeks. That money comes from the state. The state then pays Burbank, and Burbank pays the firefighters. So they're not making that much money in Burbank. They're making it because of how they go on task forces or outside things they do for agencies. So that's where this huge salaries come from. It's not because they're making $400,000 a year just being a firefighter in Burbank.
Correct. When they deploy on something like that and they're gone, they are making overtime. And then there's also backfill, because to make sure that we have the appropriate coverage in the city of Burbank, we want to make sure that we still have coverage and we backfill our fire engines.
Reserve rigs.
Correct. We'll put our reserve rig in service. Just because we're sending personnel to help in another jurisdiction does not mean that Burbank is vulnerable. So I want to touch on that first to make sure that residents understand that just because we've sent equipment somewhere else doesn't mean we're deficient here. There might be a little period when we first send that rig out that we're backfilling and calling in off-duty personnel, but we do make up that staffing level. Now, as you put, when they're out, yes, they are getting paid overtime if they're going to be gone for multiple days beyond their normal shift. And yes, when that happens, basically it is all through the reimbursement process. So if they're responding to a fire in a national forest up in Northern California, the U.S. Forest Service is responsible for that fire, and they will be reimbursing the state of California, who in turn will be reimbursing the departments that responded to that incident. So yes, we do get our salary reimbursed for an incident like that.
Yeah, and deservedly so. Let's move on to the night of the fires. We recently had the tragic fires. I was actually listening to the radios, and I heard the initial dispatch for the Eden fire, and the first Verdugo dispatch, and the first size, we had 100 by 100 fire starting, small fire in the beginning, but with those winds, it exploded, and you could hear how within 20 minutes, it was already more than they could handle. And the county, in fact, we have a video on our YouTube channel, the first 90 minutes of the Eden response, with just all the radio traffic. It's horrendous. And in all honesty, why that could have happened in the city of Burbank very easily. If those winds were coming on a westward at that velocity, and they started in the Burbank Hills, you could literally take out everything between the hills and the 5 freeway without. I mean, there's no way to stop that. There really isn't.
Yeah, a wind-driven fire is a unique situation.
Yeah. Now Verdugo got really overwhelmed with calls. With 14 jurisdictions, everything else they're trying to deal with. So they actually went and each city dispatched their own calls. So you were involved in that entire process, and we have like an emergency center here in Burbank. So talk about that night a little bit and what went on, because I think you guys did a great job. I was listening the whole time, and you guys are on Red 3 and doing amazing work with all the wires going down, the trees going down, and of course, first aid calls. So talk a little about that night and when you decided to go to the emergency center, how that whole situation worked.
Yeah, so in that situation, we didn't activate our full emergency operations center, but we did activate a component of that. So we brought in key departments, like I talked about. So we quickly realized we were being overwhelmed with calls just within our own jurisdiction, even when they switched to that. Our fire units were going out and handling wires down calls, trees down calls, and that takes time for those units to be tied up. Many of your listeners and viewers may not realize that out of our normal staffing, we have 6 fire engines. We have 6 stations. We actually upstaffed that day. We staffed an extra engine and some additional apparatus, including a fire patrol, which is a type 6 fire engine for us. So we did staff additional equipment. We did have additional resources, but even that was overwhelming, those additional resources, and going out and chasing every single wires down call and every single tree down call was tying up our resources for things that might not have really been a hazard, and that Public Works or Parks and Recreation could handle the tree down issue, and we don't need to stay on scene for that. We can go investigate, make sure nobody's injured, and then move on to the next call. And same thing for wires down. We could go out, make sure that there's no actual threat to property, there's no fire danger, nobody's injured or hurt from that, and then we can move on to the next call if we can be working with water and power more directly. Now, there are ways for us to get a hold of them, but we were having to play telephone tag just like anybody else. They were also being inundated with calls from the public and everything else. So what we decided to do was stand up a component of our emergency operations center. We brought in representatives from those 3 key departments to sit basically across the table from our fire personnel. We were all in the same room. So that way, when a call came in, we could make sure that those departments were aware and could start sending resources at the same time, instead of having to take the time to then delay making phone calls to those departments and get those resources started. They could hear the radio dispatch simultaneously, and they could also get their resources started together. We could have close communication and contact with those departments, so we could find out ETAs. We could find out if this was something that we could even leave unmanned, where we didn't need to leave a fire engine there. They could confirm, yes, wires are at that area, but they are not energized. They're low voltage in that particular area, and they're not energized, so they're not a threat. So yeah, our crew is about 5 minutes out, you can leave type of thing. So it really enhanced that communication for all of that. So it really enhanced our capabilities as a city to perform more efficiently and more effectively. Like you said, with what happened with Verdugo Communications, they were overwhelmed with all the calls from all the jurisdictions they're serving.
Plus the Eden Fire going on.
So the way it worked is they were still dispatching out major emergency calls on Red 1 because we were still monitoring that. But routine calls were coming out on Red 2, and it was up to each jurisdiction to hear those calls on Red 2. And then for us in Burbank, we then would put it back out to our own equipment who's monitoring Red 3, which is another channel.
Yeah.
So we actually had 2 battalion chiefs sitting side by side. One was monitoring the incoming traffic from Verdugo, and the other was on the radio to our resources in the field. This way we could go ahead and actually communicate both directions, field to the EOC back to Verdugo if necessary. We eventually brought in the police department as well, as things really started to get a little more hectic in the evening, and we needed some more traffic control issues solved and things like that. So we did bring in the police department at one point as well to spend the rest of the evening or night into the next day in there with us as well.
I know you had our city manager Justin Hessen there with you guys too, who spent the night. How long were you guys there for? What time did you finally break it down?
So we kept the full component of everybody there, including the city manager, who was there as our director of emergency services. When we have a proclaimed emergency or the EOC stand up, he serves as our director of emergency services. So he was there the entire time with us. And I also want to make sure that we also give a shout out to our public information officer. Although they weren't there, we were in close contact, because I'm sure you saw all the messaging we were getting out.
Jonathan Jones, as we now call JJ.
Yeah, so we were on the phone with him constantly. I think Jonathan and I were on the phone more times in that 24-hour period than we have been in the last year. But yeah, we worked overnight through the night with the same people. Keep in mind, most of the people who were there working overnight had been up and working their normal shift that day. And so for most people, by the time they actually got out of there and went home to go to sleep, they were up well over 24 hours doing this. We started to stand down our emergency operations center component about 7:30 in the morning, 8 a.m. the next morning, when the winds had died down and we were getting caught up on stuff. Basically, we didn't shut down fully. We kept the Verdugo dispatching component there. We kept a couple of our personnel from the fire department there as support personnel. The 3 people from the different departments got relieved by a new staff during the day. They came in, got a briefing, and then from there, since they were going to be at work already, we just had them go back to their offices, and we were in contact with them at their office. Since it wasn't as hectic at that point, we didn't have a need to keep them sitting directly across the table for us. So we officially started demobilizing the EOC probably around 8 a.m. the next morning, but we didn't officially close it until the next evening, because we still were managing through that all the way through that day in the EOC still.
Was that a result of, I remember, I want to say 4, 5, 6 years ago, we had another wind event like this that was very serious. And Verdugo was just dispatching actually single engine responses for structure fires.
Yeah.
Because there were so many things going on. Is this system now a result of, they thought about that and said, hey, you know what? We need to do something different because there's just too much going on at once?
It's not necessarily just because of the wind. So the one that you're referencing is actually back from 2011. It was the ones that happened.
That long ago, huh?
Yeah, back in San Gabriel. I know it doesn't seem like that, but that was the historic.
I remember that night.
Yeah, that was the historic wind event that we had, was back in 2011, and that really took a toll on the San Gabriel Valley, especially in the Pasadena area and stuff like that. And the dispatching, the way we do it for that catastrophic dispatching model, isn't necessarily just because of the winds. It's for anything that we have. If we go into an earthquake mode or anything like that, we already default into going into our own jurisdictional dispatching. It's for anything that would overwhelm the resources of Verdugo, so they can now manage the incoming calls and then take the outgoing dispatch off of their plate and give it to the local jurisdiction, as well as allowing the local jurisdiction to then control their resources, because there might be communications failures as a part of it. And so by controlling your own resources, we have fallback communication and line of sight radio channels that we can fall back on that might not necessarily make it back to Verdugo, and we would lose all that communication altogether. So it's a plan not just for the winds, it's a plan for any true catastrophic situation or any emerging situation where it overwhelms our dispatch capabilities.
I want to get back to the Eden fire real fast. Now, that first happened. I reached out to you, maybe 2-3 days afterward, and I said, hey, I'd like to do a podcast and talk about all that. He said, hey, look, I'm really tied up right now. I'm in Pasadena. I'm doing things. What were you you were very busy. What were you doing during that entire, what were you responsible for? What were you trying to accomplish at that time? Because I'm sure it was just mass chaos.
Yeah, so it was juggling multiple things.
Organized chaos, though.
Organized chaos. It's juggling multiple things. So that's a good point. Also, because I talked about what I do and what I'm responsible for. And in my bio, you talked about I've responded to other jurisdictions. Our jurisdiction always comes first for me. So right after all the chaos in our own city, and as we were starting to clean up, that next day, I wanted to get all of our paperwork in a line, started working on our recovery paperwork. Once I started seeing that we were getting our stuff caught up, we had some discussions with Pasadena, and also up in the unincorporated LA County area and stuff. So I offered our assistance to help in any way that we could. So for that day, I kind of went over and started assisting Pasadena with troubleshooting some stuff with them. So their emergency coordinator was in their emergency operations center, still dealing with a lot more than what we had going on because of the fire. She utilized me for a little bit to go to their shelter site. I was kind of trying to track down some problems for her and get information back to her. It was kind of serving as some eyes and ears for her out in the field to get some of that information. But at the same time, I'm juggling what we have going on back in the city. Although the wind had died down considerably, we start to go into that next phase now for us after the response, which is going to be our recovery phase. So at the same time, I'm working now at looking at our damage assessment and our initial damage estimates. And what does that look like? So I was juggling multiple things, but at the same time, that whole point and concept of mutual aid is one day we're going to need their help. So if we can offer our assistance, it's a mutually beneficial thing.
We did the fires a few years ago.
Yes.
Well, as we record this podcast today, it's Storm Day 2025 in Burbank. What are your concerns right now? I mean, 2 weeks ago it was the fires. 2 weeks later now it's flooding and mudslides. What are your concerns right now as this storm is starting to hit us?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say that I am glad that I am not one of my colleagues right now in one of the other jurisdictions, because I've been there and we've done that here in Burbank. We have had those rains after wildland fires, and it does bring secondary incidents that we have to be worried about. If you remember our 2017 Latuna fire, following the 2017 Latuna fire, early 2018, we had our own mud and debris flows, made national news. It's still, if you watch the Weather Channel, anytime they have these weather gone wrong type shows on, they always show the clip of the Prius going down Country Club Drive, since it made national news. So for us right now, fortunately, we don't have any really recent burn scars that are of concern, at least for the rain amounts that we're looking at today. The fires that we have had in the past that are most recent have been in areas that will not really cause any harm to homes if there is anything. Our most recent one is the one that was up off of Country Club Drive. That actually, fortunately, burned right above the debris basin. So any mud and debris that we may generate from that, and not from this storm, but from a heavier storm, would go directly into the mud and debris basin. This storm for us, although you're hearing things going on with the news, with the Eaton fire, the Palisades fire, and some of our other local fires, LA County Public Works, who manages our watershed, has not issued any type of phase mud flow alerts for our city. And again, that's because our burn scars are a lot older. This, for the city of Burbank, would be considered a beneficial rain event. We're going to probably be seeing our heaviest rain here in the next few hours. It'll be this afternoon into this evening. But even at that, we're not looking at much more than a couple inches today and a few inches total over the 2.5 days that we'll be getting rain.
Now, what about those debris basins? I know back to 2017 after the fires, we got them emptied immediately after a storm. Do you assess where they're at right now, and if we need to get them emptied of debris before another big storm could come in 2 weeks? We have no way of knowing. So do you have to monitor how much room is left in the debris basin and let the county know to clean it out or not? Or is that something you would look at?
Yes and no. So the county public works is very good. They manage most of our debris basins. We do have a couple debris basins that are managed by our own city public works. County public works does send their crews out periodically to do inspections. When I say periodically, it's multiple times a year to do inspections just for routine maintenance, as well as capacity in them. After any significant rain event, they always come out and check the capacity on them. And then if it is really a significant rain event, you'll even see them out there during the event checking on current capacity and to make sure that water is actually flowing from them as it's designed to. Now, although they do come out, I believe in trust but verify. So yes, I do go to all of our debris basins annually. I do check on them. And then before any significant rain event, so anytime we have significant rain forecasted, I am on direct conference calls with the National Weather Service. So unlike just watching the news or getting something off of weather.com, we get specific weather briefings. I am tied into webinars or teleconferences directly with the National Weather Service. We pull spot forecasts specifically for Burbank. So when you hear a forecast for the LA region, we'll pull a forecast that gives us something specific for here in the city of Burbank. So we'll know what we're really facing. We'll look at the inches per hour that we're looking at. And then we'll even send out emails to all the respected departments and what we might be facing. But if it's something significant, I always go out the day before and check. Even if I've checked not recently, I always go out at least the day before and get eyes on each of these debris basins, just for my own peace of mind, especially after what happened in 2018.
Well, let's hope we get through this in good shape. Now let's talk about the one subject nobody ever likes to talk about, but it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It hasn't happened for maybe 30 years, and that's the big one, an earthquake. I'm sure that takes a majority of your time to always make sure that you're preparing, because it's going to happen. You don't know how serious. You don't know what's going to fail, what's not going to fail. We know we have very old overpasses, and at one time we had 3 overpasses. And if they fail, Burbank would actually be cut into 2 pieces. The 5 would be the separating of the 2 pieces, and resources might be stuck on one side or the other. But now we have a new Burbank Bridge, of course, which I'm sure hopefully will be seismic stable in that situation. But talk to us a little about what you do for earthquake preparation, and because it's going to happen, and we're due right now for it. So let's talk a little about earthquakes. What do you have to say about what you do with that?
Yeah, you brought up a good point. It's Southern California. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We have small earthquakes all the time. Most people don't realize it, but if you actually go onto the USGS website and look, there are earthquakes every single day. Most just aren't felt.
1.2, 1.5, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. And so when we look at that, we do prepare for earthquakes. One of the things that I like to say is we do have within the state a California catastrophic earthquake plan. And I'll go into that here in a second. But at the city level or jurisdictional level, we do keep catastrophic earthquake in the back of our mind. But when we do most of our planning, doesn't matter if it's for earthquake or anything, we do what we call all hazard planning. So it's for any type of hazard. But when we do that, we don't necessarily plan for the 1% incident. We plan for the 90% incident. So we plan for the earthquakes that we're more commonly going to see, something like a Northridge type earthquake. And then we can scale up or scale down from there. But if we plan for the catastrophic earthquake, then we're not prepared for when something smaller happens. And if we prepare for the catastrophic earthquake, we think that's how it's going to be. We don't know how it's going to be yet. So preparing for that is preparing for the unknown. So when we look at this, we prepare for the most common size earthquake, something more like a 6.4, something that we saw like with the Northridge earthquake, and how that will impact us. As you saw, even with the Northridge earthquake, it brought down overpasses. It brought down an overpass on the 10 freeway. It brought down the overpass on the 14 to the 5 interchange. So we don't have to think catastrophic to have something like that happen. So when we plan for something like this, yes, that's one of the critical things that we look at. When you look at Burbank, it's bisected right in the middle with the 5 freeway. There's no getting around that. And yes, as you said, we had some aging overpasses. Luckily, with the 5 widening project, we have had some new overpass construction put in. They've also seismically retrofitted some of the other stuff that is here. But again, there's no guarantee, right? Until it actually happens, we don't know. You can say something's rated to whatever magnitude, but until that magnitude happens, we don't know what will actually happen. So we have to prepare for the unknown. And in that situation, we do have what we would call area command that we would go into. So we have plans that if the city is bisected, we would go into area command, and we would have what we have east of the 5 freeway and what we have west of the 5 freeway. Those would become 2 of our branches. So we would have East Branch and West Branch. We would then go into that area command, similar to what we talked about with Verdugo, where an incident commander on each side of the freeway would control the resources, fire, law, public works, whatever it may be, on each side of the freeway. So we do have that in place that we can manage resources locally on each side, and we at least have resources there for immediate need. We will, no matter what, even if overpasses did come down, be able to get resources around. We just have to take a little bit more time to get to a passable position to get across. But we will keep managed resources on both sides of the freeway to manage that immediate need resource. So if, for example, there's only 2 patrol units in the west side of the freeway at the time from law enforcement, we will make arrangements to start moving an equal number so we can actually have adequate response on both sides, because it might be the point that they had a call going on when this happened, and a lot of our resources were tied up, like, say, at the mall. And so it just happens when the earthquake took place, a lot of our resources were cut off on one side of the city. Well, the remaining units will handle that immediate need threat. We will move and position resources back into an area to provide that support. And then we will go into that area command for both sides of the freeway.
I think people need to rest assured that it has been thought out and there is a plan in place. Like I said, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We don't, and you don't know when. It could happen in 5 minutes. It could happen in 5 years. So it's middle of the night, middle of the day.
And most of the exercises that we do revolve usually around around an earthquake. It's our typical thing. It's the thing that we're most, attuned to, because it doesn't matter what, you're going to see something about earthquake preparedness, or you're going to see Dr. Lucy Jones on the TV or something. It's something that in California, we're very attuned to earthquake. So when we do a lot of our larger disaster drills or emergency operations center drills, not just in Burbank, but throughout the state, you'll see a common theme that a lot of times it's focused around earthquake, because that's the thing that if we do more sets and reps, then we're ready to go when it actually happens.
I remember back in, I think it was 2008 or 2009, maybe, the Great Shakeout Day. I actually went on a ride along with Engine 11, and Mark Hatch at the time was going to become a captain. Just at that time, he just retired recently after.
Yes,
who's a great guy, who's a super guy. But when the call went out, imaginary earthquake and everything else, and to watch how they responded, watch how they assessed their district and all that. So when an earthquake first hits, everybody moves their rigs out of the stations, correct, and then they start patrolling their districts for damage and be preemptive before calls are made.
Correct, and it's not just the fire department. We have a whole thing with earthquake mode. So for the fire department, since you brought that up first, is fire department, when we have that earthquake, Verdugo will send out the alert. We go into earthquake mode. We move to our appropriate channels, like we talked about with that catastrophic dispatching. So that way we have our direct dispatching for our units. All of our stations will move their equipment out of the apparatus bays, because we don't know what the building might have suffered in that initial earthquake. And we don't want equipment to be stuck in there if there's an aftershock that might make that worse. So we want to get our equipment out as quickly as possible, have it ready in case we need to go somewhere. And then the first thing we start doing is assessing our own facility, making sure that facility is still structurally sound. Then we'll do basically our hazard assessments within our area. They'll start doing windshield surveys. Now, this isn't just unique to the fire department. This will be the law enforcement side. So our police department will be doing windshield surveys. Public Works will be doing windshield surveys. They'll all be looking at different components following an earthquake. So from the law enforcement standpoint, they're looking at law enforcement threats, traffic control issues, signals out, things like that. They're also looking at our streets passable. Public Works is kind of looking at our bridges, underpasses, things like that. Also our infrastructure, same with water and power and all that stuff. So we're going to go out and do quick initial windshield assessments of what's going on. We do this for every earthquake that reaches a certain magnitude that triggers us to go into it. Basically, if you felt it, we're probably going into earthquake mode just to assess it.
A lot of times I'll hear, I won't feel an earthquake, but all of a sudden I hear Verdugo saying they're going into earthquake mode. I go, and I have to check into where was that, how much, So, I mean, they're on top of it as soon as it happens.
And that's one thing that our fire department might go into earthquake mode for something, and we might not go into full earthquake mode for all the other city departments, because the earthquake might have been felt more to our east side. It might have been in West Covina, which is one of our cities. And so it might have been felt more there, triggering us to go into Verdugo-wide earthquake mode, which impacts all of our cities. So we might not have felt it where we would have been doing damage assessment or those windshield surveys with Public Works, Water and Power, and everybody else, because we really didn't feel anything. You might have seen your water jiggle a little bit, but they felt it more in the San Gabriel Valley. But since Verdugo goes back to what we talked about earlier, is all one system, the alert goes out to all of Verdugo resources. So you might see our fire apparatus out doing a windshield survey when others might not be. So I also want to make sure the public understands that if you don't see everybody out all of a sudden cruising the area, it might be that we didn't feel it necessarily in Burbank. Explain
to me what a windshield survey is. It's not, you're not looking at car windshields.
No.
So explain what a windshield survey, what that entails.
Yeah, so a windshield survey gets its name because we're in the vehicles, whether it be a police car, a dump truck, a fire engine, whatever you might be in, and you're looking at everything through the windshield. Basically, at that point, we're not getting out of our vehicles, assessing stuff. We're driving by. We're getting a quick visual down and dirty of how big is big, how bad is bad. Yes, there might be a building that looks collapsed. If we stop and take our time to really go and assess that building, we might find out that it's just a facade that's really damaged and there's not really a lot of other stuff, but we've taken that unit out of service that could have been looking at 2 or 3 more blocks in that same amount of time. So in this initial phase, we're going through and doing this rapid assessment of what's going on. And then we know what parts of the city are hit hardest, and we know where we're going to probably focus in our attention. Doesn't mean that we're not going to do life-saving measures. If there's somebody who's injured, of course, life safety always comes first. But we want to try to assess as much of the city as quickly as possible. So we're doing that in the comfort of the vehicle while we're driving around behind the windshield. And then we're going to get out boots on the ground after that and then start doing more detailed assessments after we get that first down and dirty snapshot of what's going on.
Absolutely. I think we're in good hands. I think you guys have it figured out in advance, and people will know that you're just not playing it by cuff. It's really, there's really a plan in place and it's thought out.
Yes.
And I'm sure you put a lot of time into that entire plan and organization, and you continue to probably look at it, probably on a monthly basis, don't you?
Yeah, it's chaotic when it happens, but like you said earlier, it's orchestrated chaos. It's going to look like, a duck on water. The legs underneath are paddling as fast as they can, but they're just kind of gliding across the top. I wish it just always looked that graceful. It doesn't. A lot of times it looks like we're running around, but there's a method to what we're doing.
Absolutely. Well, let's get off of earthquakes. That scares enough people as it is. What would you like to see residents do to be preemptive for disaster? What should you advise people? We always talk about earthquake kits and this and that and everything else, but what do you advise? And is there anything that you or the city does to help people, or talk about preparedness a little bit for the average resident? Yeah,
so there's several things right off the top that residents can do and can control their own destiny with a lot of this. First thing is sign up for Alert Burbank. Alert Burbank is our alert and warning system that we have in the city of Burbank. It's similar to, but not the same as the wireless emergency alerts that you get for an Amber Alert. It will be received on your phone, unlike a WE Alert, which just hits a cell tower, pings off of everybody who's within the circumference of that polygon of that cell tower. Our Alert Burbank is more targeted. So you can sign up with your home phone if it's still a landline phone or voice over internet phone. You can put your cell phone in there, your email address. We actually recommend you put as many modes of communication as possible, because what will end up happening is we will send out a targeted message. And even if cell phones are down for some reason, or you're in an area with low or poor cell phone coverage, it will go to your landline. It will go to your email. You will still get that message. Unlike WIA. WIA is getting a lot of criticism right now. And again, WIA is just a tool in the tool chest. We will use WIA as well, the wireless emergency alert, but we will also use our Alert Burbank. And if you're just waiting for a WIA alert, it's like I've tried to explain to people, we might not send the WIA alert first. We might send an Alert Burbank message first. For example, the country club fire that we had, we did send out a targeted evacuation warning to people in the country club area because it's a one-way in, one-way out. Although there wasn't truly a threat, we wanted to make sure they were aware. We put a warning in place and we let them know because it is a one-way in, one-way out canyon. If we would have used WIA for something like that, it would have hit everybody within the cell phone towers of that area. And since we put cell phone towers on higher points, the antennas go to further distances. So you put it in the foothills. I could have sent out a WIA message and it could have been targeting people on the other side of the 5 freeway. And on a WIA message, we're limited to only 360 characters. Doesn't give me a lot of options to say this is really targeted for the country club drive area. It's more precautionary where we can put as many characters as we want in our message, and I can target the specific block that I want it to go to. So first and foremost, signing up for Alert Burbank. You can go to readyburbank.org or the Burbank City website. There are links on both to take you directly there to sign up. Second thing is have a plan. So many times I've responded to incidents, like I said, up and down the state of California and to other states. Most people are unprepared. We just got done talking about earthquake. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Most people do not have the necessity and the supplies that they need within their own home to take care of themselves following an earthquake. If you look at different websites, they're going to give you different things. I'm not going to say one is right over another. Have food and water. You'll see some sites say have 3 days worth of food and water. Some will say 5. Ours says 7. I'm a big proponent of 7. That's a week. If you look at previous incidents that are a large significance, like Hurricane Katrina, things like that, it takes a couple days just to get everything mobilized, to bring in FEMA resources, to have points of distribution set up. The likelihood of us having anything set up in under 5 days to start providing that humanitarian care of water and food to people is probably slim in a true catastrophic situation like an earthquake where supply chains are disrupted. So I say have 7 days. And again, it's not going out, and you don't have to go and spend a lot of money on these things that you see on TV with all of these MREs, meals ready to eat, or these done kits and stuff like that. Have a plan and have a kit. It's simple. You can just do something as simple as in your pantry, buy canned goods that you're not typically going to eat. I tell people, like if you're not going to eat Chef Boyardee, buy some cans of Chef Boyardee and put it in your pantry. Not to knock on Chef Boyardee, because I don't want to get in trouble with somebody who says, I love that stuff.
Yeah, we love the chef.
But if that's not something that you typically eat, you will in an emergency, and it will last for a while. And I say, get something that you're not typically going to eat, because if you get something that you eat and enjoy, what will end up happening is one day you'll come home from work, you'll be tired and not want to cook and not want to order takeout.
And there's the chef.
Yes. So if it's something that you're not as inclined to eat, I recommend you do that, because it'll always be there. And canned goods will last for several years on the shelf. But have a plan, have food and water, have a kit, because we're not going to be there in every situation. As we talked about earlier, I've got 6 fire stations. On any given day, there are 6 fire engines, 2 ladder trucks, 3 ambulances with an additional ambulance during peak staffing. That's not a lot of resources. We have to triage those 911 calls coming in. We're not going to be able to be there for everybody. So have a plan, have a kit. And last, but certainly not least, after what we're seeing with these fires, if you're a homeowner, reassess your insurance every year. Go around your home, look at things that you've bought. We don't even think about if you bought new electronics. Is that on your plan? Have you looked at what your insurance coverage covers? Have you looked at inflation and what rebuilding costs are? Always revisit your insurance every year, if not every other year, and make sure that you're adequately insured. We're seeing too many people, not just in these fires, but it's a common trend of people being underinsured. And I'm not talking about people that are on the fair plan, and as some people call it, the unfair plan. But if you've got homeowners insurance, it doesn't matter if it's a flood, an earthquake, a fire, we are constantly seeing that people are underinsured for what they need to rebuild, because they got their insurance when they bought their home. It's gone up quite a bit in the 10 years since they bought it, and they've never looked at their insurance since then. They haven't shopped around. They haven't gotten new quotes. They haven't upped their insurance coverage. And when something happens, they're inadequately insured for the repairs that need to take place.
I want to go back to one thing you were talking about with preparedness. I've also been told that, especially during an earthquake, you should have a meeting place. So if people are separated during a disaster and your house is, burned down or flattened, you have a place where all the family members know where to go to find each other.
Yeah, if there's a communication failure for some reason, you want to be able to have some type of meeting place. One of the things that's recommended is like a church or a park or community center that's nearby that, if something happens, and it's not just for an earthquake, it could be for kids coming home from school and there's an evacuation from a wildland fire. Mm-hmm. You can't get home for whatever reason. You should go to this alternate location, whether it be a relative's home. If there's no other relatives in the city, then go to a church, go to a rec center, go to a community center, go to a designated park that everybody in the family has agreed upon and knows that's where you should go check. In addition to that, with what you brought up, have an out-of-state contact. If you've got friends and relatives that live out of state, if we have something like an earthquake, we're going to tie up our phone lines here more. It's easier to play relay that I can call an out-of-state relative, and then my parents can call that same relative to check in on me. That person becomes a message board or a bulletin board for all of our messages.
There you go. Good idea. Good idea. Well, we're about ready to wrap up here, but I want to know, what is now your continuing focus moving on? What is it? I know you've got all the demons in the world hovering over us in disasters, but what's your focus now moving on daily, monthly, yearly right now?
So our focus right now, especially from my division in emergency management, is really on that community engagement. We're really trying to get the community more involved in doing home preparedness. Again, we're seeing that as a common trend. So we're spending more time in the community. We're spending more time at different civic events, neighborhood watch meetings, different civic group meetings, where I am presenting and trying to encourage people to have that plan and make a difference for themselves. Again, that's the biggest thing that you can do for yourself. Have a plan, have a kit, be prepared. It's not just for earthquakes, it's for anything.
I don't want to inundate you because I know you're busy enough, but if somebody wants to talk to you or talk to somebody about preparedness, things like that, who would you advise that they call?
Yeah, so they can contact our front desk. So they can call our main phone number, area code 818-238-FIRE. It's an easy number to remember. And they'll put them in contact with me. Again, it's one of those things where I'm a one-person division, so it is about timing. So I might not be able to get back to somebody immediately. They can also email. Our contact information is on the city's website. It's one of those things where I will get back to them, but we also have readyburbank.org, which is basically a preparedness site for the city of Burbank that we've put together that is tailored more towards the community than anything else. I would recommend that be their first starting point, but I am more than happy, especially if you've got a group to come out. We really don't do individual emergency preparedness because over 100,000 people, it would take us forever. But if you have a group, like if you're part of a neighborhood watch group and they meet on a Wednesday evening and you would like me to come out, somebody from that group could reach out to me. We'll arrange. It might take a few weeks to actually get the calendars aligned, but I will go out to that group and present. If you have a church group, I will go out and present. If it's a homeowners association at a townhome or a condo in the city of Burbank and it's for the entire townhome or condo, we will go out and present. Again, we will do group presentations, not individual presentations.
Good to know. So, as we wind up here, is there anything else that you'd like to say or tell the people before we end this thing?
I just would like to thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure. We talk quite a bit on other things throughout, when you're asking about things that are going on.
I always appreciate getting right back to me every time, too.
Yeah, this is great because, again, I don't think a lot of people know what emergency management is or the things that we really are doing behind the scenes in the city of Burbank. Residents in the city of Burbank are very fortunate. Not every city in the county of Los Angeles or anywhere in the state, not everybody has a dedicated emergency management position. More and more cities are now starting to get these dedicated positions, but still it's few and far between. In the 88 cities within the county of Los Angeles, there's probably less than a quarter of those cities have a dedicated position for emergency management. It's usually somebody that, in addition to your other duties, this is something you need to think about, where we've taken the time and invested to have this position to look out and think about these problems.
Well, I think we're very lucky here in Burbank, not only to have an emergency director, but to have you with your experience, because I'm sure you do a lot for other cities too, to help reach out to them and say, hey, you need this or that, so we're very lucky to have you. And I know you're going to be busy, but let's hope you never get that busy, because that busy means something's gone haywire. So, Eric Baumgartner, thank you so much for coming to the studio. Thank you so much for this great conversation. I hope it helps people. It'll be on our channels forever, and hope they can tune to it any time, and hopefully they can get something out of it. So once again, thank you for coming in.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. And everybody else out there, thank you for watching. Hit the old like button and subscribe. And if you're in the car, hold two wheels right now. Don't let go as you're listening to this. And we will talk to you next time. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for watching our My Burbank video. Please consider a channel membership to support us, or head over to our merch store where you can pick up some great items. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the latest videos, and please don't forget to hit that like button.